channel. All right, and let's get started with Dr. Degenhardt. Dr. Degenhardt, you're muted.
All right, take two. Well, welcome everyone. It is great to have everyone here, and for our monthly Let's Talk About OMM Research Seminar series. This actually is unique because we are now in our second year of the program, and we're at a slightly different time because last year at our annual meeting, we did a survey of membership to try to identify the best time for this meeting. And this is what the survey demonstrated. So we're pleased that we are addressing some of the needs in order to allow as many people within the network to participate in these meetings. And this meeting is also particularly important because October is here in Kirksville, where we celebrate the osteopathic thought and Dr. Still's legacy to developing what we all benefit from at this time. And so we're very pleased that the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine, Jason Haxton, which I'm sure he is known worldwide for his work and his support for osteopathic medicine, and is evolving each year to be more of a replica of the old doctor. So we're glad to have you here, Jason. And so we're going to take care of a bit of our housekeeping business first. So why is Founders Day, first of all, important? So after Dr. Still passed away in 1917, within 2 years, his predecessors acknowledged the need to have an annual celebration of his work. And originally that was done on his birthday, which was in December. And they found that it was way too cold for the constitutions of the people here in Missouri, and wanted it to be a little bit more festive than frozen. So it was moved to the month of his birthday, which is in October 3rd. And they basically had a board meeting designating that day would be when we would celebrate the osteopathic thought. It's something that I think the research network is going to continue to expand. As far as I know, this is one of the few virtual celebrations, and we're going to continue to, as I said, expand that at future Octobers. So as many people know, so why is this important? First of all, I can also say that if we look at an institution like Harvard, everybody recognizes the term Harvard. Well, it was established by a John Harvard in 1636. And his legacy was pretty well sustained for about a century. And then all of a sudden, the purpose and the vision that he had kind of got lost. And now we just know Harvard as the name of this institution. And so we certainly want Dr. Still's legacy to survive longer. And that's part of today's meeting, part of our founders celebration in October. Okay, so there are other components to our Let's Talk About OMM Research Seminar series. We have quarterly updates, which is what we're having right now. We also have a webinar and a journal club. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that we are inviting you to actively participate in them. So with the journal club, anyone is able to volunteer for that. Sarah has developed a system for putting your name into the hat, so to speak. And the only thing that we want to know is, what is the article that you're interested in presenting? There are so many articles that are being published these days that we want to make sure that we're really focusing on the premier articles to get everybody up to date as much as possible on the latest evidence. So please put in your name if you are interested in doing a journal club. We have instructions as to how to do that. We have a citation that you can look at as well. And it doesn't require any experience other than just the willingness to do so. The webinar is a slightly different type of program. Here we are wanting people who have are content experts within the theme of the webinar. So have done some active publications in that. And we want their presentation to certainly highlight aspects of their contribution, but in no way limited or isolated to that. We are really wanting people to present on the full scope of that topic area within the broad scientific community. And I'm really excited to let you know about some of the webinar speakers coming up in this year. In November, we are going to have a representative from the National Institutes of Health who will be overviewing the new strategic plan for the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. That center, which specifically promotes research within the mind-body therapies group, of which manual therapies, manipulative medicine is one of them. So that is in November, and I think it'd be one that you don't want to miss. In our next one after that, in February, we have a Dr. Jennifer Belsky, who is a fellowship-trained pediatric oncologist who has done manipulative medicine research in the field of pediatric oncology. And so she's going to be looking at current research being done within the field of pediatrics, and certainly will highlight some of the findings that she has had at premier neonatal and pediatric hospitals here within the country. We are also expecting Francesco Serratelli, a PhD European DO trained clinician who's been doing a lot of work over the last decade, looking at newborns and as well as looking at neurophysiologic responses to manipulation. And he's going to be looking at placebo response and central phenomenon that is related to hands-on therapies. So that's another one that is scheduled for this upcoming year. So certainly we want everyone to participate when you can. These are also programs that you can view at your convenience. So as Sarah's already said, that there's a YouTube channel you can go to and view them. And we also have a place to, a forum for us to carry on the discussions from one meeting to the next. And Sarah, do you have things to show us how to do that, or
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the DO-Touch.NET website, and to get to this forum, you're just going to go to Let's Talk About OMM Research, and then click down on Discussion Forums, and then wait for your computer to load. Okay, and then click Discussion Forums here again. And I will say you have to be a DO-Touch.NET member, and you have to sign in to the website to be able to access this information. And then here are all of the forums. So we have discussion for the director updates, which is this. We have discussion for the journal clubs that have happened in the past, and discussions for the educational webinars. And so you can just click on them and see, like we're going to the Journal Club one. This is the most recent Journal Club. And then you can click on that one and view the video or the recording and then put in your thoughts and questions. And typically we like to have the presenter of the Journal Club and the educational webinar respond back to you guys when you ask questions or leave comments. But that's how you do it. You just go to this tab here and click on discussion forums and it will lead you right to it.
Thank you, Sarah. So first of all, are there any questions that anybody has in regards to the Let's Talk About OMM Research series, what to expect in the upcoming year?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to then move on to another new initiative, thanks to Sarah's leadership, called the OMM Minute. And so we've sent out a couple of these in the last few weeks. We had an important member of the American osteopathic community, a Dr. Stephen Blood, who passed away in the past month. He and his, I think he was a third generation DO, so he lives and breathes osteopathic thought and care. As a family physician, he integrated it throughout his medical practice. And so we have one of the OMM minutes highlighting his advice, particularly to people in earlier training stages, although those words are relevant to all of us, no matter at what stage of our careers. And we also have another one regarding the International Consortium of Manual Therapies. These are designed to be very focused. We don't want anything to be lasting longer than, the longest for sure would be no more than 5 minutes. Our goal is 1 to 2 minutes of information. So it's very concise, very focused. If there is, and a lot of times when there are questions that come up in our discussion forums, this could be an avenue for us to disseminate those words to the network at large. So if you have any ideas or information that you think is really critical, really important for the network in general to know, this may be an avenue to use. You would address ideas to Sarah, and she will discuss them with me, and we'll then work through what is necessary to produce them. Any other comments on that, Sarah?
No, I believe you covered it all. And just in case you didn't mention it, didn't mention it, these are posted on social media. So that's why there's kind of that time limit, but they're posted on social media. So more than DO-Touch.NET members are going to see them.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any questions that we need to address?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so general updates in regards to activities within DO-Touch.NET. So we have our annual meeting coming up in March. It will be held as traditionally done the day before the opening of the AAO convocation. The convocation will be held in Orlando this year at the Rosen Shingle Resort. They've had the meetings there previously. It's a very fine venue. I can say through my inside knowledge that it is going to happen. There will be a live component. Whether, the numbers of people show up, we have no idea. Each day and each week is new, and we are all having to be very flexible as we deal with the ongoing pandemic. But it has been explicitly stated that it's going to happen. And the hosts of the conference have done tremendous changes in how they manage conferences to help make sure everybody stays safe. And there will be various policies to help to do that. And I can also say that that will be also hybrid, so though people will be able to participate at a distance. That is also our goal for our annual meeting, which will be held Wednesday morning. And I'm not seeing the actual date. If you can pull that up for me and let people know when we get to that. Yeah, do you have that, Sarah?
Yeah, that's March 23rd, 2022.
Okay, March 23rd. So a little later than previously. Should be beautiful weather in Florida. One of the few times it should be that way. We typically have a morning program because we know convocation is a very busy time, and that is what we're planning from 8 to noon. It will also be able to be joined in online. We will be giving updates on the work that we've been doing. We'll actually have a working group session so that everybody that's participating will help us look at issues of one of our previous studies on nomenclature in regards to the types of treatments that we do. It is really critical from a research perspective that the words we use are generalizable and actually illustrate what we do with our hands. And so that's going to be one of our key outcomes from this year's annual meeting to help to advance some understanding and consistency along that line. There will be CME credit for that. And we will also be having a keynote speaker addressing issues of patient-reported outcomes. As you know, patient-reported outcomes is just critical, fundamental to practice-based research networks. We do not live in ivory towers. We all don't do things identically. So we need to have a consistent way to look at both effectiveness as well as adverse events from both a clinician's perspective as well as our patient's perspective. And we've been doing a ton of work to create an infrastructure for that. And so we will have an outside speaker that give us an update on what the general scientific community is doing on that front. And we'll also give you an update on our timeline for integrating into our practices. I will say that, every day new challenges come up. And we had established a name, an acronym, a logo for our next project called Osprey. And we found as we were trademarking it that it was going to cause major problems with people that have already trademarked that type of identity. And so we're going to have to rebuild one. And so once again, it's very sad that we have to go back to the beginning all the time to make this happen. But important things sometimes do take time and it requires ongoing dedication and so forth. And we're going to stay behind this no matter what. And it really requires that we have accurate data that we collect with each visit that a patient comes in, and that data is collected over time, because we know the true potency of the osteopathic model is not on an individual treatment, but is on a care process that is sustained over a period of time and ideally over life to promote optimal health. And it is this type of system that's going to be required in order for us to actually demonstrate that. So that is our annual meeting and our program. Are there any questions about that?
I don't see any.
Yep, thank you. There are two other meetings I also want to highlight, and we've given you some updates over the past few meetings. The AT Still Research Institute is the initiator and the funding sponsor of the International Consortium on Manual Therapies, or the ICMT. And this came from work that Dr. Paul Stanley at the University of Arizona, Francesco Serratelli from Italy, and myself, we were doing some conferences between 2012 and 2014, and we were saying, well, where do we go from here? You know, what should be our next conference? And we took a step back and said, what is really going to be most meaningful for advancing the use of hands for care of patients? And we decided that that required an interprofessional collaborative environment. And from that, the International Consortium on Manual Therapies has developed. We're now engaging 30 to 40 members representing 6 different disciplines. So that would include osteopathic medicine and the general osteopathic field throughout the world, chiropractic, structural integration or Rolfing, massage therapy, physical therapy, and the general basic science community. We will be hosting a webinar on October 30th from 10 to 12 a.m. Central Daylight Time. So if you are in Europe, that should be kind of early evening time for this meeting, and it will be recorded, so it could be seen afterwards, where we will be having 12 leaders presenting during that time frame, background information about why this direction is important, what we are currently doing to prepare for our conference in May, and to give you some perspectives of the challenges and the insights that have been gleaned through the collaborative process thus far. It is free, so it's very easy for you to learn about what ICMT and hopefully get plenty of interest for joining us for the conference. It will be live in Arizona, in Phoenix, on May 6th through 8th in 2022. It will also be offered virtually for those around the world that won't be able to make it to Phoenix. It is a unique program. We have world-renowned keynote speakers representing the global scientific community with Lars Arndt Nielsen, who is an amazing physician and basic scientist from Denmark, who had been the president for the International Association for this Study of Pain, and then the center director for the National Institutes for Complementary and Integrative Health, Helene Langevin from NIH. So they will be the keynote speakers, but everybody in attendance will be a participant, not just an observer. We have breakout sessions where we are going to be engaging collaboratively, interprofessionally, in respectful manners, information about nomenclature to help us better understand what we're talking about, to look about what clinicians see as the evidence base supporting the work they do, and to have a review of the current evidence as a way to actually, pull together perspectives into the latest understanding of what is it that we believe, what we have shown, where we need to go in the future for our research as clinicians and as basic scientists. For those who have been involved in NIH conferences within the manual therapy arena, you know very well that they put on excellent programs that are often representing the basic science community very well. The ICMT is the bridge that is a grassroots direction from clinicians to the basic scientists to address issues that have kept basic scientists from being able to advance the scientific understanding within this field. So the ICMT conference, May 6th through 8th, will launch the insights that these working groups have done to the international manual therapy and basic science communities. So once again, please join us for the webinar if you have interest, learn about what we're doing, and we hope that you'll decide to join us for the conference. Are there any questions or any additions that need to be added to that? Okay.
I don't see any questions at all, sir.
All right. So with that, it is truly my honor for this meeting to have Jason Haxton, the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine, present some perspectives from Dr. Still's time and his thought that related to science and research. This is, as I said earlier, in recognition of October as our Founders Day, our Founders celebration for what we hold dear within our practice-based research network. Jason Haxton has been the director of the museum for almost 2 decades and has really pushed the museum in very progressive ways to better understand our history and to be able to better disseminate the history worldwide. He has traveled the world to bring the museum to the various countries throughout the world. I can't even imagine how many they are and how many times he has done that. So I know many people are aware of him. He brings the story of osteopathy alive as good as anyone, if not better. So Jason, thank you for joining us, and the microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and thanks for having me. You know, again, I see a lot of friends in our panelists as well as our attendees today. And, you know, it's almost been coming on 2 years that we've actually physically seen each other. I mean, the AAO conference was one of the last ones, which is why they're probably going to be one of the first ones with Touch.NET coming before that. But the good thing is during that couple years that I've been off, I've been actually following Dr. Still's plans and getting in better shape. I exercise every day, I lift weights, I eat better, and coming on 64 years old now, feel pretty darn good. So I guess, again, the old man, kind of like Dr. Kaur is like, you know, you can be as young as you want if you take good care of your body. And so trying to do those things, and hopefully we're all having those opportunities. Sometimes it's the opposite. When we're shut down, we just eat more. But again, it's been a good opportunity for me. And I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about, so I want to share my screen and see if that'll work. It looks like it's going to. And again, really enjoy being here to talk about OMM research and Dr. Still. Kind of, you know, OMM, the reason it exists is there's a need. When things don't, when there's no need, when we're all happy and all's going well, there's just a homeostasis and we just keep going. If it's working, don't change it. But when we hit a blimp and there's been pain or some kind of health issue, OMM research, manipulative medicine, is serving a need. And that's what brought Dr. Still to this. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But he did want us to know it's progressive, that each osteopath is meant to take it further. And I think that's very visionary for him as a founder to know that he is not the end all, but really the beginning, a start, and we all can go and add to what he's done and make this thing better. And so, as he said, my hope is that every osteopath will go on and search for scientific facts as they relate to the human mechanism and health and the ever-extending, unfolding nature's truth and laws. And that's what we do by understanding anatomy, by using technology of ultrasound and the techniques that Brian has come up with at the Still Research Institute of ways to accurately teach and show progress and show that we're actually doing something. All these things Dr. Still would be very pleased about with what we're doing. And he always intended this to be international. As he said in 1913, this flag of scientific progress, and again, research and science, is a truth not just in America, but all countries. And when we look at some of these original researchers and people that spread the word, like Florence McGeorge from Tasmania, and kind of Australia, Dr. Nomoto from Japan. We've got the Little Johns that all came from, England. And we've got even from what we would consider Iran or Iraq, that was Persia in the day. But Ashir, and then we have Anis from what would be Syria. I mean, it's really interesting that we are probably better connected to some of these countries, as a source to share information, and hopefully that will continue. But again, he didn't want us to compromise what manipulative medicine had to offer by getting it tied up in the medicine of the pharmacy, the surgeries, and things that he felt came secondary to what manipulation, that at the lowest level we should work at it. And then the last statement was in 1915, I hope the faithful, and I think that's you guys, will rally around the osteopathic flag, and we will build an international school that will offer no compromise unless it's golden truth. And what more is that than Touch.NET and our international research that's going on right now? It is a school, and it is exactly what Dr. Still foresaw. And so it's really kind of exciting to be part of this. When we look at his own discoveries, and Dr. Still was a handsome young man. I never was that handsome, so I think I've aged better. But the bottom line was, Dr. Still looked at his father's way of treating the body and spirit. And manipulative medicine, as he said, I didn't invent it. It's been around with all old cultures, Asia, Europe, American Indians. And that's where he first saw some of his ideas of manipulation, was with the Shawnee Indians. Though he says, I organized it and I made it teachable. That's where I get the credit for this, and expanded it to grow. That's what he did. And so during the time of cholera, when you basically have feces in your water supply and you get these horrible bacteria that dehydrate you and you die within 2 to 3 days, he was able to look at the bodies that had died from this and got to thinking about disease and how the anatomy and things functioning correctly would help fight disease. And so that's where he first got his ideas. One of the things he worked with was a Hispanic person who had fallen and injured his neck quite badly. Understanding anatomy from those corpses, he knew what was normal, and he took the abnormal of this man's head, put it back, and basically everything came back together. There's also the story of a woman he thought he was going to a pregnancy. When he arrives, she's dying of what he thought was pneumonia. She can't breathe, she's feverish, she's got mucus, she's dying. And he's got nothing. But as he's looking over her body, he notices this massive disarrangement in the rib area, and he is able to think that's got to be painful. She had a bad fall just before these symptoms. He puts it back, the fever reduces, the breathing is no longer labor. She goes back to basically stability and goes to sleep. And he thought, wow. So symptoms of disease can also be symptoms of anatomy, or basically an alignment issue, and put things back and the symptoms go away. And so this was a major breakthrough in how to see the body and basically look for the anatomy and structure first. And then you look for the other stuff, because if it's that and you fix that, then everything's done. So Dr. Still, this was his foundation of looking. And even as a child, the first treatment is, again, by accident. He has this massive headache. He can't get comfortable. He takes a rope. He hangs it from 2 trees, his dad's plow rope. He puts a blanket over it because it's kind of rough. And it's got to be low because it's swinging and it's making things really bad. But when he gets down to that lower level, that actual pulling relieves the tension of the muscles that a headache would give you. And so as his muscles relax, the blood flow to the greater occipital nerves are basically taken back to normal, and the headache goes away. And so again, it is fascinating to think that by accident, again, the pain, he just wanted relief, but it was actually one of the first treatments. And we see on his treatment table, if you look to the far left, past that hat, there is one of those little a belt on a block. He's just reproduced that rope in the tree, made it a lot easier. And here he is as an old man, he is still using that treatment, because whatever physiology caused him to have migraines, would reoccur, but he could always treat it. And that's what's fascinating about how we work with research, how we discover things. And so the concepts of Dr. Still is, as we look at nature, that biologically the blood flow of good nutrition carried in and bad waste taken out, this has to do more with health and the body's ability to heal than anything at the time. And what Dr. Still says in Research and Practice, his last book, is that you get the waste and the sewage of a city to stop, and that city is going to have problems. Same with our body. Once the waste cannot be removed, then all kinds of complications come with that. And so he likes his little analogies, but they're good analogies of what we need. And so the body is a biological system, everything's connected. And if we disrupt any of it, kind of like a machine, it will cause a complete failure. And so we want to treat things at the lowest level. So of course, these are Dr. Still's ideas. There's a whole new generation that comes into it, and not always with his permission. When we look at Elmer Barber, he was a student in the second class, and he took all the information of Dr. Still's lectures and what he saw and created his own book, Osteopathy, The New Science of Healing. So the first book on osteopathy isn't by Dr. Still. He didn't think it was ready for a book. He knew it needed more time and more research. But Elmer Barber's book comes out and it shows everything that's going on. If you go to the museum's website, you can actually see this book and the different techniques that were used. But we know exactly what Dr. Still was teaching. It was pretty darn good stuff. And so when the book was ready to teach OMM, for Dr. Still, that wasn't until 1910 when he creates basically Research and Practice. But what we find from somebody who knew him at the time of the Barber book, and this is Wilderson, he met Dr. Still just before the school started in 1890. He was going to be taught as kind of an aid, as a support for the school that was coming. And what Wilderson says that, the old doctor at that time, he was very independent in his thought and action and had many bright, though very peculiar ideas, which I notice in the late years, I think have been modified to some extent. So we see that what Dr. Still was doing early on changes over time as he's influenced by other students and doctors and moving this idea forward. And so by 1910, he produces what he considers the last book. And in that, we see through the chapters a lot more OMM techniques. And so if you have not read Research and Practice, it really has a lot of philosophy, a lot of ideas. I find it enjoyable, even though I don't understand always the OMM aspects. It's the way he sees things and analogizes these things, including cities and sewage. It's in this book. And so again, this is the book that was ready for osteopathy. Jeanette Nettie Bowles was in the first class. And if you look towards the middle and to the right a little bit, there she is. And she wasn't even sure a woman could learn this stuff. She comes to see Dr. Still because her father was saved from his help in the Civil War. And when her mother is paralyzed from a fall, she comes to Kirksville and her mother's able to walk again. And she says, Dr. Still, can a woman learn this? She was no fool. She graduated from the University of Kansas. She was a bright student. But when William Smith, the anatomy instructor, left, she got Gray's Anatomy from Dr. Still and said, do the best you can. And she taught anatomy and did a great job. She edited the Journal of Osteopathy, which was the research magazine of the time, looking at what osteopathy was doing and how it was doing it. And then she founded her own school in Denver, the Bowles Institute, which now we have the Rocky Mountain Vista School in Colorado. Another important woman at the time of Dr. Still would be Alice Patterson. And if you look in this photograph in the middle, there's a little girl. That's her daughter, Lee Patterson, and Alice is next to her. She actually was a major support to Dr. Still, and she wasn't in the first class. She was busy being the secretary to Dr. Still and helping him as his personal assistant while the first group of students were going through. She did get in the second class, but while she was working with Dr. Still, she developed her own osteopathic techniques, working with the gallbladder. She ended up teaching obstetrics and women's health. What better than a woman teaching it? And she convinced Dr. Still there should always be a woman attending for a choice, not assuming every woman wants a woman, but they should be able to have that choice. Now, with her husband, who was a little bit of a lawyer and actually the school secretary, they actually went to the capital of Missouri and got osteopathy legalized as a formal physician, medical doctor degree. And so they are known for that. And that's why in 1897, it's legalized. And that's when Dr. Still gets his diploma. Once it's legalized and it's a formal physician degree, June 22nd, the birthday of osteopathy, he gets his degree. Alice, her husband, passes on. She uses her acquaintances when they're in DC doing all this work to do international. So she's also known for spreading osteopathic medicine internationally. This is an interesting character, Edith Ashmore. You either love her or hate her. I know some friends of mine that are in some organizations like, oh my gosh, damn Edith Ashmore. But she was the department chair of OMM at the American School of Osteopathy and wrote the book Osteopathic Mechanics in 1915, a great book if you haven't looked it up or read it. Her contribution actually is to the osteopathic literature for non-osteopathic scientists. They liked what they saw and supported osteopathy because of her writings. She advised students to use their own insights and not mimic A.T. Still's technique. And so I think that was one of the greatest things she could say is find your own skill and make it yours. It's kind of like Olympian athletes. You don't copy someone else's style in form or in gymnastic. You find your own to do those things. And that's how osteopathic medicine is best used. Dr. Still would say himself, don't parrot me, don't be like me. I'm an old man. You want to do technique like an old man does it? No, do it the way you do it as a young person. And so he was one of the first to tell people himself, stop trying to do it my way. And that Barber book, one of the reasons he didn't like it was that basically this isn't osteopathic medicine. It's a philosophy of health, mental health, diet, exercise, and OMM. And you've missed the boat on it's a philosophy of health. So again, and again, there are other techniques that you can use than just the few that I do. And so again, other things Edith Ashmore did is she actually went to D.D. Palmer and took training. And what she stated from her chiropractic training is, it's exactly what Dr. Still was doing in the Barber book, his early stuff. But we have moved forward and advanced in that. And that was her opinion of what she saw from chiropractic medicine at the time. We couldn't go on without talking about Louisa Burns of the Pacific College of Osteopathic. What a sweetheart, an amazing researcher, and really giving all of her altruistic, like Dr. Still gave everything to osteopathic healthcare, and it's basically moving forward. She just stands out. She wrote her first book on basic principles in 1907, which was when the Still Research Institute was being organized, and she published a lot of scientific research. Of course, it continues today on the A.T. Still University campus. And what we also find from Dr. Burns in her research is that, she stuck with the Institute. So in 1914, she's the full-time associate in Chicago and then became the dean and served until 1936. The thing about research is it never has gotten funded well. That's just the challenge of it. And she used her book proceeds and profits to support the ongoing research when the AOA and other organizations were not giving the funds that had been promised, and they never came through. The interesting thing about the A.T. Still Research Institute was initially it was to get a graduate physician degree so that you could be like a doctor plus, but not, and so you would do research, which is what granted you that higher level of being a super physician. But people didn't want to, they were already a physician, so I'm happy with where I'm at. So it didn't play out that way as what it was supposed to be, a school to create bigger, better physicians. It actually then just went upon the line of research just for research's sake, which was probably better anyway. The first book out of the A.T. Still Research Institute, which was edited by Carl McConnell, Clinical Osteopathy. And as he says, in this book, we consulted Dr. Still's writing, all the greats, Hazard, Hewlett, Tasker. When we look at all the people to the left that contributed oh my gosh, it's basically the pedigree of osteopathic research and the greatest writers of our material. And so it is a really was a great institution. And I just copied a couple chapters so you can see the amount of material on OMM that was being used. Body and soul, Dr. Still always said we can't have enough anatomy. It will verify your mental concept. Of course, now we have ultrasound, we can just look, but I want you to remember the structures are entirely different in appearance and feel in death than in life, that the body is different in death. So it's a good guide, but it's not the same. And that's good because we have William Sutherland, who actually took the cranium, which looked like a rock and had no movement, and said, but it does have movement. It's just that in death, it basically is contracted and sealed and it basically doesn't move anymore. Kind of like a turtle. You can flip a turtle all the way around when it's alive, but as soon as that turtle's dead, that shell will snap and break. The flexibility is gone in death. And so we have images of Dr. Sutherland. The funny thing is, if you know Jane Stark, she wrote a history of Dr. William Sutherland, and how did he become so unique in cranial manipulation? But what we find is he was just a newspaper journalist and a writer. And so what made him successful as a famous osteopath and a researcher? Well, one of the things we discovered about his being a journalist is that he was given a scholarship, or he might not have come. But why would he give up the lucrative business of being a journalist? Well, because technology changed. As a kid, he grew up through the whole printing service, putting all those tiny little letters backwards, upside down, all the same size, printing newspapers. You would do it by touch. So literally you could read almost like a blind person, like Braille. You could feel the differences of the letter. You knew the alphabet, but not just the alphabet, but backwards and upside down. And any slight difference of a rise, that letter's the wrong size, put the right one in. His skill was so sensitive to touch because of the skill required to be a typesetter. But here's the funny thing is, he becomes an adult, he's the best, and we invent a machine that the linotype types it and you don't have to set it anymore. That brilliant skill is worthless. And so bottom line is he's out of work. So he gets a new career in medicine. But here's the other thing, why a journalist? Dr. Still knew that journalists catch the attention of the public, and osteopathy as a new idea needed publicity. So people who could write could explain what was going on, give them the scholarship, let them tell the story. And so we found scholarship after scholarship after scholarship to either writers or family members of writers to get that cool support. So now we understand how he became a physician, how he got into it. He had to, he needed a career change, but then why he was so sensitive that he felt what no one else felt. His skill level was so much better than the average student at the school. And so from his work, his touch went from the outside looking in, and he used Mike, the cadaver, to get his ideas about cranium and how the disarticulated skull had external motion in lesions. He developed his own helmets and techniques, but he used himself as a subject, which would be off limits kind of today, but no one else would do it. And so he compressed his cranium and saw what the effects were, and then found ways to undo those things. So his theories are basically, cranial and fascial bones are designed to move. There is a rhythmic motion. There's a primary respiratory mechanism. Problems of dysfunction involving skull can be diagnosed and treated through manipulation. And when he presented his ideas in 1932, just about as many people are showing up today, there was very little interest in what he was doing. But within basically 14 years, he was basically nationally recognized for his work. Not to take credit away from Sutherland's great work, but actually Margaret Sorrell, who also found out there was another woman, Charlotte Weaver, doing cranium, and we don't hear as much about her. But Dr. Still said we can treat everything from the foramen magnum, the base of the skull, to the toe. But I want to know more about the cranium, but I've been too busy. I haven't had time to experiment with that. So Charlotte, I want you to get in there and find out about the cranium and what's going on there. So she graduates in 1912. She is married. Just like our COVID, they have their Spanish flu, their bird flu of the time, and it kills her husband. She survives. And now, without the love of her life, she commits her whole career to the cranium concept. And what she comes up with is, through embryology, she looks from the inside out that the cranium are modified vertebrae. These are vertebrae. And what she says is, if we look in by dissecting an infant skull, we can see the three vertebrae, and there is separation. That this is basically what it is, that things work in three. And we know that William Johnston said that vertebrae works in systems of three. If we look at the base of the cranium, that's just a giant vertebrae at the bottom. And just as the sacrum is modified vertebrae at the tail, we have modified vertebrae at the cranium. So it's really quite fascinating that no one came up with this sooner than Charlotte. And we're still learning more about what she had to say. But her ideas is that lesions have local and remote effects. They are expressed. You do find symptoms. They are reducible. They can be treated. And there are techniques to treat them. And what happens when you do treat them? Do you get relief? Her idea was that this would mainly help children. And so, of course, we do see the benefit of cranial, and my kids had it at birth, to make sure those plates are where they belong. She spent 25 years of work. There was a series of her articles in the Journal of Osteopathy Research, but it was not promoted by the AOA, so she packed it up and put it away. Thank God, Margaret Sorrell rediscovered her material and has brought it to us, but she was so deep into it, it's almost like another language. To understand Charlotte Weaver's work is almost impossible, because she almost developed her own way of expressing it, and nobody was passed on to understand it. We can't forget John Martin Littlejohn, born 1865, died 1947. We have a bearded John Littlejohn when he was teaching physiology, and his graduation picture a few years later. But he started research in 1898 with Hewlett and a student by the name of Goetz, who experimented on dogs in one of the old barns and looked at how we could basically disarticulate, how we could work with basically dogs and do a variety of things. Again, a picture of him teaching physiology. And then he started looking at the research of physiology and psychology, how mind and body work together. And of course, a lot of other things. We have William Smith, who was our first faculty, looking at X-ray. And again, we still use ultrasound and a lot of tools to look inside the body as to what we're doing. But he was able to inject beeswax where the blood had been, photograph it, and see the entire circulatory system undissected in a body. He looked at an old person, he looked at a young person, looking at research of what do we know about people based on what we're seeing. And so again, very unique and distinct variety of research being done with the body. The last person I want to talk about, there's a lot more people involved, but really the person who put us forward the most was probably Kim Kaur. Irving Kaur basically was a PhD, but his understanding of biology, physiology, and the body was unsurpassed. And he comes to Kirksville because he gets in trouble. He goes to a communist meeting of some students back when communist isn't what we think it is today, and he gets blackballed. He cannot find work anywhere, even though he's Harvard educated, he's a brilliant mind, he can't find work. He's told to go to Kirksville, there's something new there, cool your heels a little bit, and then come back. Well, he comes to Kirksville, he never leaves. But one of the things he looks is that the nature of illness are basically when you put the demands on the machinery, the body, the musculoskeletal, and to which those are maintained and serviced have to do with health. And so if you sustain emotional damage or behavioral actions on the body, and you get some tension there that actually will strip and hurt the body, that needs to be addressed. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a form of this, a way that the body isn't coping. Structural, postural, or functional disturbances in the system can also create health problems. Inadequacy of visceral and metabolic functions of the body can cause health issues. and just plain poor communication between the body and the other systems, which can happen for various reasons, are all things that will affect your health, and we need to get those in order. And so again, just highlighting some of these people, and there are so much more going on right now that it's really an exciting time to be researching osteopathic healthcare. And so I do thank you for your time. If there are any quick questions, happy to answer those. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Jason. We appreciate you being here. We are at time, but if anybody has a quick question, you're more than welcome to put it in the Q&A or raise your hand. We can take 1 or 2 questions, and then we understand if people do have to leave to get to another meeting. Does anybody have any questions for Jason?
Super cool. Yeah, thanks for the solar core. Good.
Oh, we do have one question. Okay, Dr. Robbins, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I appreciated this greatly. Fascinating. Were the women doctors of the option for women to choose equally available to male patients? Or was it only women who were given the option and women doctors only available to women patients?
That's a great question. Actually, no, the idea was to be able to give a choice to the patient, to not assume men want men and women want women, but that you would actually have the choice is what Alice Patterson. So really kind of ahead of their time, though, no, the women serve their purposes. I mean, head of the OMM department, and such as Edith Ashmore was, there was no issue of women working on men and doing whatever needed to be done. And so, but I do think it was a new concept to think that that people would want a choice. And I think in that sense that was a new step. That's what osteopathic healthcare was doing, things that no one else. Women were actually working. And then options were given. It's like, well, no, you get what you get from the doctor. No, you're a patient rights. This is what doctors still always considered is the patient is the focus. And we don't even touch the body till you comprehend there is a spirit within that body. So, that's a great question.
Okay, Jason, we have one question. It says, how many of these old texts are around for us to read?
So actually, we have them scanned and you can just go to the museum website. So if you go to www.atsu.edu and then /museum, or just look up Museum of Osteopathic Medicine on Google, it will take you to our website, hit research, and then there's journals, there's the JOs, there's books. You can pick and they're already scanned and you just click and they're yours for free. And so there is a plethora of material that you guys can use, including basically the various books that we talked about today.
That's brilliant. And I believe that Jeff has put the link to that in the chat as well. Does anybody else have a quick question for Jason at all? Oh, we have one more. Okay, go ahead, Kate.
Hi, thanks, Jason. This is wonderful. I just wanted to make people aware of, I believe last week, maybe the week before, Janet Bloomer just came out with a book on the history of early folks in the osteopathic world. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's available on Amazon. I was trying to come up with the name and I cannot, but I believe the Academy has it for offer as well. Bloomer, B-L-U-M-E-R.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And I did want to mention another real cool, you can't separate women and osteopathy. I mean, it's the way it's threaded, but just type in Google PBS and women and osteopathy. And we have a great video that was done that shows really the great leadership today of women in the profession. But again, it's about all of osteopathy. It just highlights that aspect, which is, again, has always been with us. It's not in the sense that to us, it's not unique. It's just the way it is. But there are constantly new books coming out, and I'm fascinated, again, how much work is going in. So thanks for that highlight on that.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Jason.
Go ahead, Dr. Degenhardt.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, I mean, every time I hear you, I learn new things. I mean, you opened up some new ideas, definitely also reinforced why DO-Touch.NET exists and why there are still very relevant issues, even down to know that, nomenclature issues in the cranial world. I mean, we're still dealing with that. That's an important part of the scientific process. And that's why we're highlighting that as part of our annual meeting. We will also be presenting at the ICMT conference the results from our work with our previous program of Technique of the Month in that venue. So you all are doing exactly what Dr. Still said. You're continuing to advance and to shape osteopathy in the 21st century. So thank you for attending. Feel free to go to the forum to ask further questions. I'm sure Jason will be more than happy to carry on dialogues there. We look forward to seeing you back next month for our webinar, where we'll have a speaker from NIH talking about their new strategic plan, focusing on manual therapy research. So please don't miss that. It's great to see you all, and have a very good weekend.